Okay, today is the 31st of August. We missed 2 nights of talks, the 29th and the 30th. So now we're on the Satipatthana Samyutta. But before we proceed with the sutta itself, I'd like to explain a little about the practice of Satipatthana, because the other day somebody asked me about a question about how to practice Satipatthana, so I thought I will spend a little bit of time to explain. Now there's a bit of confusion nowadays on the practice of Sampajanya, Sati, Satipatthana, Samadhi. In the Buddha's teachings, he talk about Sati Sampajanya. So the other day we went to the suttas. We saw that Sampajanya means mindfulness. Sampajanya means mindfulness, general mindfulness. More of mindfulness of the body. How when you walk, you know you're walking. When you sit, you know you're sitting. When you eat, you know you're eating. When you drink, when you change your clothes, etc. Now, later you find there's a sutta that refers to mindfulness of the mind. So, Sampajanya is general mindfulness. General mindfulness helps us to keep our attention focused, not scattered. Because in meditation, what we are trying to do is to walk the path to destruction of the asavas. Liberation, attainment of arahanthood means destruction of the asavas. So that is our aim. So before you can totally destroy the asavas, at least you have to keep it under control. And asavas, as I mentioned before, my interpretation, asavas means uncontrolled mental outflows. The mind flowing without control. Stray thoughts, daydreaming and all that. So we want to keep a check on it, not allow it to flow. So Sampajanya, mindfulness, helps in that respect. But you should notice in the Noble Eightfold Path, general mindfulness is not a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Sampajanya is not a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. But Sati is. Sati is remembering to put your attention on only 4 things. The body, feelings, mind and Dhamma. So Sati means recollection. Recalling these 4 things. Always remembering to recall these 4 things instead of putting your attention out into Mara's field, Mara's domain, which is sights, sounds, smells, taste and touch and thoughts. Because the Buddha says, if we pay attention to the objects of the 6 sense bases, then we get caught, because Mara is trying to bait us, give us beautiful sights to see, nice sounds, nice odors, great taste and all that. So that's why the Buddha says we have to keep to our domain, to our home ground, where we are safe, that is to keep our attention on the 4 objects of Sati. Now, Sati is or Sammasati is the 7th factor, the Noble Eightfold Path. So, Sammasati, right recollection, is just what I mentioned just now, always keeping your attention on these 4 things, not to stray out of these 4 objects. To contemplate these 4 objects. And then in the Noble Eightfold Path, Samma Samadhi, right concentration, is the 4 jhanas. The 4 jhanas. Now in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 117, the Buddha says the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, we start with right view. We must always start with right view. Right view means hearing the suttas, that is words of the Buddha. Then after that, having heard the words of the Buddha and attaining right view, you enter the stream already, you're an Arya. Then because you have right view, you will naturally begin to have right thoughts. Once you understand what right view means, then you know the importance of right thoughts. So you always watch your thoughts. Don't have greed, don't have intention of harming others, having ill will, anger. These three are wrong thoughts. So we counter it with right thoughts, the opposite. So after you attain right thoughts, you will lead you to right speech. Because why? To talk now, before you talk, you must think first. What you think determines what comes out of your mouth. So right thoughts determines your right speech. And when you have right speech, because you have right thoughts and right speech, you will also naturally have right action, because it's motivated by right thoughts and right view. Right view will help you to control your actions. So you have right actions, and also following that, you have right livelihood. Livelihood is a natural consequence of having right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action. Right? So you will have right livelihood. After you have right livelihood, if you proceed further, that means you walk the path to the holy path. Then you will also have right effort. Right effort actually is an extension of right thoughts. Right thoughts means you watch your mind. So right effort is also the same. Any unwholesome states arise in your mind, you discard it. And then you encourage wholesome states of mind to arise. So that's right effort. And then after that, once you have right effort, then you also begin to have right sati. That means you try to guard your sense doors. You don't let your attention stray out to the 6 sense doors. Instead, you pull it back. Always remember to pull it back to the 4 objects of sati. That's why sati has a lot to do with remembering. It is not general mindfulness. It is a specific mindfulness directed only to 4 things. Right? So now, what is it from sati that goes to samadhi? This one, a lot of monks don't explain, because the Buddha says the Noble Eightfold Path, one leads to another. One leads to another. So sati must lead to samadhi. So how does sati lead to samadhi? The link between sati and samadhi is Satipatthana. A lot of books they translate Satipatthana as foundations of mindfulness, establishments of mindfulness and all that. But it doesn't show a difference between sati and Satipatthana. They assume as though sati and Satipatthana is almost the same thing. But there's a great difference between sati and Satipatthana. As we read in the suttas the other day, if you practice Satipatthana correctly, it must lead you to the jhanas. Remember the sutta and the Buddha talk about the clever cook and the stupid cook. The clever cook, he notices the taste of the master. The stupid cook doesn't notice what his master likes to eat. So in the same way, a skillful monk, when he meditates, he has to notice what the mind inclines towards, what the mind likes. The object of meditation and the environment and all that. So in that sutta, the Buddha said, the skillful monk, when he practices Satipatthana, he must attain samadhi. If he does not attain samadhi, then the sutta says he is unskillful. And on top of that, the sutta says that he is not practicing sati sampajanya. He thinks he is practicing sati sampajanya, but he is actually not practicing sati sampajanya, because it does not end up, the end result is not the samadhi, the jhanas. So Satipatthana, as I translated the other day, is intense state of sati. Why intense? Because the simile given by the Buddha on how to practice Satipatthana was this man who was caught and forced to carry a bowl of oil in between a great crowd of people watching the beautiful girl of the land dancing and singing. So there's a man following him behind with an uplifted sword, ready to chop off his head. If he spills a drop of the oil, even a drop of the oil, his head will go off. So he has to walk with all his attention on that bowl of oil. He dare not make a slip. Dare not look left, dare not look right. Pay full attention to that bowl of oil all the time, watching one object all the time. So that simile was given by the Buddha to make us understand how to practice Satipatthana. So when we practice Satipatthana in that way, watching one object without changing our attention to any other object, it must end up with jhana, one-pointedness of mind. So from here you can understand how the practice of sati, if you intensify it until it becomes intense sati, that will lead you to samadhi. That's why the other day we read one sutta where it was mentioned that he attained the first jhana. Then he was happy that his object had been achieved. Because he was meditating, for example, on the breath. Then he put his vitaka and vichara, thought directed and sustained on the breath, on the object. Then he went into the first jhana. After having into the first jhana, the sutta says that he was satisfied that he attained his objective. Then after that, he withdrew the mind from that object. And I mentioned he withdrew his mind by focusing instead on piti and sukha. When he put his attention on piti and sukha, he entered the second jhana because he dropped off the vitaka and vichara. So that's the point I want to make. That there's a difference between sati and satipatthana, and that satipatthana, if you practice it, it must lead you to samadhi, the eighth factor. Just as the Majjhima Nikaya 117 says, when we practice the seventh factor, it must lead you to the eighth factor. Not only that, I like to point out something which a lot of people don't notice. In the suttas, the Buddha always says that to attain liberation, you need two things, samatha and vipassana. But instead nowadays, some vipassana monks say you don't need right concentration. Or their interpretation of right concentration is momentary concentration, which is not concentration at all according to the suttas. In the suttas, the Buddha's standard of samadhi, concentration, are the jhanas. Nothing short of the jhanas. Anything short of the jhanas is not up to the Buddha's mark, not up to the Buddha's standard. That's why in the suttas, Buddha always talks about the four jhanas. So samadhi can refer to any of the four jhanas, but perfect samadhi must be the fourth jhana. That's why in the suttas, Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha says that an anagamin and an arahan, the precondition to becoming an anagamin and an arahan is the four jhanas, perfect samadhi. So we were saying that samatha and vipassana are two necessary conditions for liberation. There are several suttas in the Nikayas that says this very clearly. For example, the sutta about the messenger bringing the message to the Lord of the city. The two messengers, this bringing the samatha and vipassana. So now, what is samatha and what is vipassana? Samatha, if you practice it, it will lead you to samadhi, the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Now vipassana is contemplation. And contemplation is contemplation of the four things, the four objects of sati, the body, feelings, mind and dhamma. So the practice of the seventh factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, samasati, that is vipassana. That is vipassana. Okay. So if you only practice vipassana, you are only practicing up to the seventh factor. So you need the eighth factor. So you cannot say you only want to practice pure vipassana, you don't want the jhanas. Because if you do that, then you are practicing seven factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, not eight. So it must be very clear. The seventh factor and the eighth factor are completely different. The 7th factor is vipassana. The 8th factor is samatha. So you need both samatha and vipassana. And that's why in one of the suttas we read earlier, the Buddha says there are 5 conditions that lead to the disappearance of the true Dhamma. And one of them is no respect for samadhi, no respect for the jhanas, saying that it is not necessary. Just like some monks nowadays, they say jhana is not necessary, pure vipassana is enough. The Buddha gave a warning that this type of teaching will lead to the disappearance of the true Dhamma. Because in the suttas, the Buddha says that the jhanas are the footprints of the Buddha. So if you want to follow the Buddha's steps to enlightenment, you must follow his footprints, namely attain the jhanas. So that's enough what I want to say about the Sati and Satipatthana. Okay, tonight we come to the last 3 suttas. I'm going to talk on the Satipatthana Sangyutta. Sutta 47.35, that's on page 1657. At Savatthi, Buddha said, monks, a monk should dwell collected and mindful or clearly aware. This is our instruction to you. And how monks is a monk collected or recollected? Dear monks, a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body, feelings in feelings, mind in mind, Dhamma in Dhamma, ardent, clearly aware, collected, having removed covetousness and grief in regard to the world. It is in this way, monks, that a monk is collected, sato, which means having sati. And how monks does a monk exercise clear awareness, sampajano? Here monks, for a monk, feelings are understood as they arise, understood as they remain present, understood as they pass away. Thoughts are understood as they arise, understood as they remain, understood as they pass away. Perceptions are understood as they arise, understood as they remain present, understood as they pass away. It is in this way, monks, that a monk exercises clear awareness. Monks, a monk should dwell collected and clearly aware or mindful. This is our instruction to you. That's the end of the sutta. So in this sutta, it's slightly different from a previous sutta we read, which explain these same 2 things, sati and sampajanya. The sati part, the top part, is exactly the same as in the previous sutta. But the bottom part about sampajanya, mindfulness or clear awareness, is slightly different. In the previous sutta, the Buddha talked about mindfulness of our bodily actions. But here, the Buddha says that sampajanya can also mean mindfulness of our feelings, our thoughts and our perceptions. So, in other words, it is mindfulness of our feelings and our mind. So here there's an overlap because in the practice of sati, we are also supposed to be aware when our feelings change, when our thoughts change, when our perceptions change and all that. So when you are aware, then you can understand yourself better. For example, when certain feelings arise, you don't try not to react. You know that they are impermanent. Buddha gave a simile of feelings like raindrops falling on the pond. When the raindrops fall on the pond, on the surface of the pond, bubble appears, and in a short while it breaks up. And then another drop of water or raindrop falls on the pond, another bubble appears, and it breaks. So in the same way, our 6 sense bases, these sense objects impinge on our 6 sense bases, like sights impinge on the eye, sounds impinge on the ear, etc. In the same way, a feeling arises, and then it doesn't last very long, it disappears. But it continues to be there if you think about it. For example, somebody says something nasty to you, and an unpleasant feeling arises. And then you start thinking about it, then the unpleasant feeling persists. So that's why the Buddha says we have to be careful. That's why we want to keep an eye on our feelings and keep an eye on our thoughts also. If certain thoughts arise, then we have to try to understand what is the motive behind the thoughts. What is the thought motivated by? Is it ego? Is it motivated by anger? Then if it is, then you know that you have an unwholesome state of mind, and you try to discard it. So this mindfulness of the feelings and of the mind is quite important. So it is also stated to be connected with sati and also to be connected with sampajanya, mindfulness. The next sutta is 47.40. The Buddha said, "Monks, I will teach you the intense states of recollection and the development of the intense states of recollection and the way leading to the development of the intense states of recollection." Listen to that. And what monks is Satipatthana, intense state of recollection. Here monks, a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body, ardent, clearly aware, collected, having removed covetousness and grief in regard to the world. He dwells contemplating feelings in feelings, mind in mind, Dhamma in Dhamma. This is called the Satipatthana, intense state of recollection. And what monks is the development of the intense state of recollection. Here monks, a monk dwells contemplating the nature of origination or arising in the body. He dwells contemplating the nature of vanishing or ceasing in the body. He dwells contemplating the nature of origination and vanishing in the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, collected, having removed covetousness and grief in regard to the world. Similarly, he dwells contemplating the nature of origination and vanishing in feelings, in mind, in Dhamma. This is called the development of the intense state of recollection. And what monks is the way leading to the development of the intense state of recollection. This is noble eightfold path, that is right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, etc. This is called the way leading to the development of the establishment of to the development of the intense state of recollection. It's the end of the sutta. So here, the second part, that the development of Satipatthana means contemplating the arising and the ceasing factors in the body, feelings, mind and Dhamma. What is the conditions for the arising of the four objects of Satipatthana? What is the conditions for the ceasing of the four objects of Satipatthana? We know from previous suttas that the body subsists on nutriment, on food. So the arising of the body also is stated by the Buddha that the body arises because of the coming together of mother and father, and mother is in the right season, and then there's a thing called Gandhabba, waiting to be reborn, and then he enters the womb. And then after that, he can only continue to survive if the food nutriment he gets. Then the nature of ceasing of the body can be like there's no more nutriment for the body, then the body will cease, will die, because there are other factors also. And then similarly for feelings, was mentioned before, that feelings arises because of contact. Contact are the six sense bases. So if there's no contact, there is no arising of feelings. And feelings vanish when there's no more contact. And then mind depends on perception and feeling. When there is perception and feeling, then there is consciousness and the mind starts working. So when there's no perception and feeling, the mind also will cease. And Dhamma is, I forgot already what was the conditions of the arising of the Dhamma and the ceasing of the Dhamma, but we can refer to the earlier sutta. Way leading to the development of the Satipatthana as a noble eightfold path. Okay, the last sutta I'm going to read is 47.42 on the Satipatthana. Monks, I will teach you the origination and the passing away of the four Satipatthanas. Listen to that. And what mounts is the origination of the body. With the origination of nutriment, there is the origination of body. With the cessation of nutriment, there is the passing away of the body. This one I think you can understand. The body subsists on nutriment, depends on nutriment, namely food. With the origination of contact, there is the origination of feeling. With the cessation of contact, there is the passing away of feeling. So contact at the sixth sense basis gives rise to feelings. When there is no contact, there is no arising of feelings. With the origination of name and form, there is the origination of mind. Or here, with the cessation of name and form, there is a passing away of mind. Here, mind should mean vijnana, because nama rupa arises with vijnana. When vijnana ceases, then nama rupa also ceases. Now vijnana also comes along with perception and feeling, because earlier we read one sutta where the Buddha says there is no coming and going of consciousness without the other factors of the five aggregates. The five aggregates, they come together. Body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. So when you have nama rupa arises because there is vijnana. And when there is vijnana, of course, it means that there is the other components of the mind, feeling and perception, etc. So when the mind ceases, nama rupa also ceases. Then the fourth one, with the origination of attention, there is the origination of Dhamma. With the cessation of attention, there is a passing away of Dhamma. Dhamma, there is Dhamma only when we pay attention to the Dhamma. Can be said to the Buddha's teachings, can be said to be the truth, reality of the world. So when you pay attention, there is a rising of Dhamma. When you don't pay attention, there is the cessation of Dhamma. Let's see what the footnotes say, 182. Footnote 182 says, Manasikara samudaya Dhammanang samudayo. Then the commentary says, the phenomena of the enlightenment factors on which you put attention on the hindrance. All phenomena come through attention, all phenomena. But the interpretation of Dhamma is phenomena. But I think the Dhamma should mean the Buddha's teachings. When you pay attention, there is Dhamma. When you don't pay attention, there is no Dhamma. Dhamma also in some other sutta is mentioned that when you learn Dhamma, you learn to differentiate between wholesome states and unwholesome states, between skillful states and unskillful states, between good and evil, etc. So if you don't pay attention, you cannot see the Dhamma. When you pay attention, you see the Dhamma. So that's the end of the Satipatthana suttas that I'm going to read. There are a few other suttas, but they are not really important, and many of them are repetitions.